you will never find where you're going.
When Nigeria is working, we will all know.
PDP and us are diametrically opposed.
SaharaTV, let them be the TV, the best TV, information, education, inspiration. SaharaTV, let me die.
I am from SaharaTV. I'd like to ask you a few questions.
Information, education, inspiration. SaharaTV, they get mouth, they get mouth.
Here to have that discussion is Mr. Lanre Legacy. Welcome to SaharaTV.
Oh, it's nice being here. Thanks so much.
Lanre, as you guys know, has been a farmer, activist. He's done everything. So he's going to help us understand what we might look forward to in Africa. So Lanre, tell me, what are the chances of Africa in the year 2013?
Well, I think it's a very big issue to discuss, because definitely we can't talk about development in Africa without looking at the issues of politics, governance, and what have you, the level of security, stability of most of these nations. It's good enough that we can say that democracy is building up. We've had a situation where most of the so-called dictators, starting from Tunisia, where we saw taken out of power after almost about 24 years. We saw that of Egypt, talking about Hosni Mubarak, leaving office after almost 3 decades in office. And several others, including Libya. And we've seen political situation where we have stability in terms of democratic governance in most of these countries, like Ghana, like Nigeria, like Angola. We've seen even opposition winning in places like Senegal and what have you. But you ask yourself, what has
changed?
What level of change do we have with all this? Has there been in terms of improvement in infrastructure? Do we have per capita income increasing and other things like that? I say no. Let's even look at it from the aspect of the election itself. Why most of these countries are having election, can we say that the election is free and fair? Fine, there may not be any violence, major violence reported around them. But we can't say they are free and fair, because if you look at it, the larger population of the people are not voting. You see a situation where in a country, the total number of populace that can vote, not even up to 50% of them would determine who becomes the president. These are fundamental issues, that has to be discussed. But by and large, we want to look at it from the aspect of what is the level of achievement that we've been able to create. We see African countries being reported by Western media as actually developing and perhaps chasing the Asian tigers. This is disillusionment as far as I'm concerned. And that is what most of these so-called governments are feeding the outside world. Like in Nigeria, particularly, at a time, the so-called minister in charge of finance was telling the whole world that Nigeria is growing at a rate of 7%. This is a country where you can't have light to even power most of the so-called industrial gadgets. You can't even have light for domestic usages, at home. And when you look at that, these are indices, these are factors that you can actually use in measuring development. And in 2012, I can say it's more of crisis. And this crisis, we must understand that they have a spillover into the new year. We have even Tunisia that had a major revolution, still battling with high, skyrocketing food prices. We have in Mali, we have, the problems of the military group there. They cannot produce food. We have in Nigeria, we have the issue of the Boko Haram not being able to allow farmers to really produce. We have in so many other countries like that, and yet Africa still remains a major exporter of raw materials, of exporting to get penny and importing back most of their produce, in pounds. If you look at Nigeria as a case study, this time last year, we were busy protesting because we still export raw crude oil, the best of it in the world. We export it out, creating employment for other countries. Likewise, diamond in Angola, likewise, copper in Zambia, and several other major countries in Africa still functions under such primitive economic methods. And by and large, these are the things that are really holding us down and not making a kind of development, the true development we anticipate from most African countries.
But I don't know if you watched what happened during the New Year Eve when Nigerians went to churches and different places to pray. And they prayed and they asked God that this new year should be that of breakthrough, that of recovery, that of divine visitation, signs and wonders. So I don't know why you are sounding pessimistic, because it's going to happen based on the projections of Nigerians. Well, my question to you is, do you think there is something that Nigerians need to do to achieve the kind of country they are projecting in this year, or is it going to be taken care of by divine intervention?
I think it's that of confusion that a man throws away drops the towel and gives in to God to come and help, where you have all that is necessary to have development within your care. And for me, I always say it clearly, the so-called extravagant lifestyled pastors on pulpits, their prayers may not offer anything meaningful in terms of development for any nation. Likewise, the downtrodden masses that we have in Nigeria that have no hope, that have been fasting and praying in poverty for long, they may not really, their prayers won't help. Except we have active mobilization, we have a situation where we can sustain revolution. Because in Egypt and in countries like Tunisia now, you've seen a situation whereby even after the revolution, there's likelihood of a counter-revolution because of lack of sustainable, people can sustain it with ideas, policies that can help turn things around. And that's the same problem we have in Nigeria. We have a situation where people go to church just because they've lost hope, not because they have even belief in the fact that the prayer would help. For Nigeria, I would say clearly, while the Arab Spring occurred in 2012, and we all think that perhaps it's going to end there, I'm not closing my eyes to the fact that we can have something like that happening in West Africa.
Let me ask you, because it's tied to what you're saying. This time last year, Nigerians were on the streets all over the world protesting about the price of gas.
That's true.
Today, the price of gas is, in many places in Nigeria, higher than what it was when we were saying that we will never accept.
That's true.
But nobody is doing anything. You're an activist. How did that happen? How did it happen that we now said, okay, we can pay that? And the government is still saying that they still have subsidy and that they are going to still remove it at one point. What is going on?
That's why I said what happened in Tunisia, in Egypt, might start happening in some other African countries. You see, what the government is doing as of now, it's a deliberate ploy to make it look as if things can't work. You see, it is only in African continent that you see the government in power, willing and actively in support of the fact that their processing factories or so-called industries are killed just to allow commercial activity. You export the raw materials, you bring in finished goods, they make their money. It would be alarming, to hear that the chairman of PDP, that's one of the political parties in Nigeria, his son was part of those that was listed as beneficiaries of the fictitious subsidy that we were fighting for last year. And it's an indication of nothing but the fact that they are stealing with proxy. They allow their sons, their friends, to stay in strategic places to continue looting the economy. And as until today, while we can account for the fact that the volume of total investment, foreign investment, as of 2010, is just 1/10 of the total looted sum in Nigeria in 2011 on subsidy alone. In 2011, at least close to $500 billion or naira rather would have gone into subsidy, subsidizing all these so-called people importing the fuel. Meanwhile, we have refineries in Nigeria that could be made to work. The government is deliberately closing its eyes to that. And at the same time, we are busy calling for foreign investors. It's a contradiction on its own. You have the resources, you're looting the resources, you're taking it out, stashing it in unproductive areas in foreign lands, and now calling foreign investors to come and help you out.
Yeah, that leads me to something else, this issue of corruption. And Nigerians all over cry, they say that corruption is really the problem. But recently, the president came out and said, no, it's not corruption, it's attitude of Nigerians. So why are you disagreeing with the president? Are you part of the people who are trying to give a bad image to Nigeria? It's the attitude, not the corruption.
I think when we begin to define attitude, and you have an attitude that makes it difficult for you to declare your assets to the public after declaring or being forced to declare as a vice president, and you become a president and you can no longer declare your assets to the public, then you begin to understand the attitude we're talking about. It's unfair to Nigerians, sincerely speaking. It's not a laughing matter that a president could come out and tell the whole world that he was forced to declare his asset as vice president. And while still serving as president, he doesn't see any moral issue about it, not declaring publicly his assets. And at the end of the day, the way you treat people caught in corruption with kid gloves shows the kind of person you are. It tells about your willingness to really fight corruption. For the president of Nigeria, talking about President Goodluck Jonathan, it's clear that they're not really interested in fighting corruption. And as long as we're enmeshed in corruption as a country, we're only playing with ourselves. I don't see any meaningful development coming up. And all the theories of the headgear economic theories of Okonjo-Iweala, as far as I'm concerned, is nothing but a ruse. Because clearly speaking, I don't see Nigeria growing in terms of economic growth. If there's any economic growth, it must be the negative one. And to me, I think...
Are you saying that you are disagreeing with all the figures they are projecting, saying that Nigeria will soon join the 20 most developed countries in the world?
A country without light, a country without good education. Why do you think the Boko Haram is thriving? If we had lots of young ones being educated, I'm sure there won't be easy tools, easy political tools used in fighting the economy itself. I think, look, we must get the issues clearly. All parameters that can be used to assess a developing country is not there, it's not existing. And anyway, the president honestly said that there's economic growth without economic development in Nigeria after he came back from Rio in one of the interviews he had, which is correct. And that's why we have today, you have a Dangote with over $10 billion as the richest black man in a country where people cannot even afford a 2 square meal. They can't afford to even get $2 on a day. So it's a major problem.
So what does that leave us with? Like the people, you're saying that the government is not, they don't get it. The people running the country, they don't get it. What should the people do? If you were still in Nigeria and you were there on the street, you were in the pool of activists, what will you be doing? How would the people lead if the leaders are not going to lead?
I think like most other countries in Africa, we need generation of genuine leaders to emerge. Leaders who really have the drive, the willingness to change the situation of the lot of African people. We're lacking that, and until we get that, we really may not be moving forward.
But when people with the potential are all abroad, they run away from the country, they can deal with it, how are the leaders going to emerge? We just,
like I keep on telling people, we just must do that. The attitude, if I'm to use attitude in another way anyway, the attitude must be there for us to mobilize and keep on educating people. And until we get that right and begin to have groups, organizations that are really yearning towards positive change within the countries we're talking about, we are not going to move forward. It has happened in Tunisia, it happened in Egypt, It's happening in some other countries. They may not give us that positive result immediately, but it takes time. And until we get that, we're not going anywhere. That's what I feel.
The Minister of Information, all through last year, he was on the attack, saying that a lot of people like you, I believe, are painting Nigeria bad by talking down on Nigeria when things are happening, progressive things. You know, we hear stories about the deaths of Nigerian politicians, accidents and plane crashes. And how do you feel when you hear a minister saying that you are focusing on the negative stories more than the positive things that are going on in Nigeria? Are you not seeing the positive?
Let me ask you, like, or perhaps I should pose the question to, what is positive in Nigeria within the past 1 year? Sincerely speaking, there's nothing positive to report. I don't say anything. Look, the minister may just be complaining that way, but I am sure about it, that he himself can't stand out to point to any meaningful achievements in Nigeria. Sincerely speaking, we're talking about the things, the factors you can use to measure development. What's the situation of the roads in the country? If the roads were good, most of these governors would not be flying distance of 2 hours in jets and be crashing. And anyway, the media is just reporting #1 citizens of most of these states. A lot of people, poor masses, who have no other option than to go through these roads, these bad roads, have better stories to tell in terms of ordeals they've gone through, agonizing moments and what have you. And sincerely speaking, they can only brazen up towards doing things right or getting ready to pack their things and leave the place. But for him to put the argument on the fact that people are just reporting what is not, I think it's not right. Look at what happened with the issue of the subsidy. They said, okay, they were going to get money from the subsidy, the excesses and what have you, to do a lot of palliative measures and what have you. Have they done it?
You mean there are no buses on the street?
There are no buses. Where are the buses?
Now, let's look at seriously about this subsidy thing, because last 3 weeks of December, the National Assembly approved 161 billion to pay for subsidy for three weeks. Initially, at the beginning of the year, they had their budget, so they exceeded the budget. They paid people more than they were anticipating. Now, this year, obviously, we don't know the situation, obviously. So why are people not worried about this? Why are Nigerians not really?
Let me add to it. That sum that was passed by the National Assembly is an addition.
Yeah, exactly. To the 860-something billion.
And that comes to trillions. That comes to trillions. And when we were fighting last year, we were fighting about 1.2 trillion. Though we later heard that it's 1.4, another person said 1.5. You know, the figures were not even things that were clear because they can't really determine who took what. But it's a sad situation, sincerely speaking. And that's why I keep on saying that it's beyond the issue of having democratic government in Nigeria to have real development in that country. Likewise, other countries of Africa. It's a lot much more, you know, we have much more things required to ensure that we have good government in that country and in Africa as a continent. And this is the time that activists generally, even the outside community, because I keep on saying it, that the Western world should not be disillusioned by the figures that most of these so-called agencies that are stood to the governments in power dishes out to them. We must really understand what is happening in Africa. As of today, over 300 million people in Africa live on less than $2. And that is in a continent of over 1 billion people. And that is where you see an individual like Dangote, you know, having $10 billion, having a quarter of the total value of the stock market in a country like Nigeria. So really, it's just about very few 1% of people who are making money. And if they're making this money legitimately, perhaps it will be meaningful. Like some papers try to, you know, misconstrue information. It's not as if they're making, most of them are stooge, political stooge to the government in power. And they use all this opportunity to amass wealth to the detriment of the masses. In some couple of months to come now, the so-called private firms that have taken over the power institution, that's NEPA and what have you in Nigeria, PHCN, will start taking control of all the facilities. These were facilities that were built years back with oil money that were made not to work. And at the end of the day, they are being sold out to individuals who are in government. You see, this is so bad a situation. And I can tell you that as for Nigeria, we are not having development. We're not moving forward. The roads are bad. There's no medical services. If you have ordinary kidney problem that you will see some counties being able to take care of in advanced country, you have to be, in fact, they will have to fly you down to either India, Germany, or what have you. And you saw what happened even to the First Lady. For several weeks, nobody knew where she was. And that is the way it's becoming an hopeless situation in that country. So how can the minister tell us that there are positive things in Nigeria when even basic health care cannot be taken care of to first-class citizens, if there's anything like that?
Now, I know you studied animal science, you know a lot about agriculture, and one of the big stories in Nigeria today is that the Minister of Agriculture is going to buy 10 million phones for Nigerian farmers. Initial cost was estimated to be 60 billion, although he came out yesterday to say that no, it's not 60 billion, it's going to be something like 6 billion. What you know about farming, how much need is there for cell phones to be in the hands of farmers, Kitipupa and all those villages?
Let's even take it this way. Let's assume the phone is being sold for 2,000 naira, a ridiculous sum. That would be about 20 billion naira. You ask yourself the fundamental question. In terms of priorities, is it communication from the farm in terms of GSM that becomes #1 issue in Nigeria, agriculturally? And you, a minister that knows very well that we have the situation where we don't have even a mechanized farming yet. Some farmers don't have access to tractors to plow their land at the right time of the season. Some farmers don't have good roads to be able to take their produce out for sales. The storage facilities within that country is not sufficient to even secure Nigerians in case there's any problem, crisis, and what have you for 2 months. There are no storage facilities to even help take produce throughout the season. Of what use would the GSM do to the farmer? I think to me, maybe somebody just has a contract. Somebody, you have a contract to buy in or to sell phone, or you have a company in China, in Singapore, or wherever that you produce phones, and you have the opportunity of having the minister as your friend or business partner, and you're thinking of creating markets for your phones, knowing fully well that it's not standard enough, you just want to put it on the neck of the government. I think these are ways that they've wasted money in time past. We've seen in time past whereby they had this project for emancipation of poverty or whatsoever, or have you, NAPEP and what have you, all these so-called policies that they directed towards farmers that were basically political. They just threw the money, part of it, to their so-called political, followers. And at the end of the day, what they did was that massive looting. 10 billion thereabout, as at that time, under Obasanjo. The same thing is repeating itself. Let's even assume that a farmer might need a phone. But I'm sure if you ask all the farmers in Nigeria, it's going to be the least in rank in terms of their priorities concerning their work. A lot of things are needed. They don't have fertilizer, the roads are bad, no storage facilities, no capital to even invest, and the next thing you are giving to them is a phone.
So why is it that Nigerians show outrage on social media about this? And all that the minister could do was to come out and say, well, the figure that you guys got was wrong. We actually have a less number in terms of the cost, but they are still going to go ahead and get this phone, 10 million phones for farmers.
I think the kind of leadership that you have determines what the cabinet and members of the cabinet will be displaying. If you look at the arrogance with which the president himself talked while he came back from Rio, while people were trying to interview him that on moral ground, there's need for him to publish his assets, you can understand that they don't really care. No matter the level of outrage that you have from the public in terms of social media, criticism and what have you, we have a government that seems so much insulated to most of this criticism. And they're just bound to do whatever they like. As far as I'm concerned, little things like that, you know, count. And like you said, the National Assembly, you can see that the National Assembly itself is not active. It's not that can really caution them. But by and large, I think for once, the help of the social media will soon be realized in a short while. We are going to get to a point where an average Nigerian will be informed enough, will be conscientized enough, and all these things will mobilize them that it may not be business as usual in years to come.
Okay, one last question. So by the end of the year, what are your projections about the political environment in Nigeria? Is it going to be the way it is now, confusing and no direction, or do you think that certain actions will have taken place that will narrow things down, that people can see exactly where we're going?
My clear belief about Nigeria, prayer or no prayer, no matter the volume of prayer we do, until we are able to have a good government structure and the right people that are willing to change, who have the willingness, the drive to change the situation, we may just be moving around in a vicious cycle.
All right, Lanre, thank you so much for coming on SaharaTV.
It's nice being with you. Thanks so much.
Okay, so when we come back, we are going to talk to Omoyele Sowore. He's going to come here and tell us what he saw in Nigeria when he visited. He just came back yesterday. So stay tuned. This is SaharaTV.